We look at what minimum wage laws actually do. We keep hearing arguments with respect to intentions. It's this idea that if you care about the least of these, or you care about people that are making low wages, then of course you're going to vote to increase the minimum wage. Gosh, if only reality were that simple, Mr. Speaker. I mean, if it was simple enough to just simply say, we're going to go ahead and decide that the minimum wage is $15 because that's going to lift people out of poverty. My gosh, why did we stop there? Why not 25? Why not 50? Why not 100? Why don't we just mandate as a body that everyone in the Commonwealth of Virginia be wealthy? And I know that sounds flippant, but I'm dead serious about it, Mr. Speaker, because I know what it's like to work for minimum wage. I know what it's like to be at that starting off position where you have no work experience, you have no credentials, you have no real education, and you desperately need a job because the way that you're going to get the credentialing, the way that you're going to get the education, that on-the-job training, the way that you're going to get the various work ethic and lessons that you need to learn in order to move up the economic ladder is through that first job. But when you price those people out of the labor market, and this isn't conjecture, Mr. Speaker, when you tell somebody that you're not allowed to hire somebody who wants to work at a particular rate because that's the job that they can get, when you tell them that they're not supposed to, they can't have that job, I think that's kind of an arrogant imposition on behalf of the government. So, again, Mr. Speaker, if we want to help people that are desperately trying to get that first job, in order to move up the economic ladder, in order to get the experience that they need to be more economically successful, then I wouldn't take away options that they would otherwise choose for themselves. And that is what raising the minimum wage does. Because as much as we all might like a reality where we can simply pass a law and demand curves no longer slope downward, it doesn't work that way in real life. And while there's been a lot of arguments on behalf of small business owners with respect to legislation like this, I'm arguing on behalf of being in that position where I needed that first job and I didn't need a politician standing in between me and my potential employer and telling me I was not allowed to have it or telling me that there was something lacking in my righteousness if I wanted the freedom to be able to negotiate that wage.
It's not the book of Matthew that tells us why the minimum wage doesn't hurt low-wage workers. It's the book of Joshua and of David, not the prophets, but Joshua Angus and David Card. They were awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics last year for 30 years of work establishing that the predictions that raising the minimum wage lowers net income from low-wage workers just don't pan out in practice. Now, their names are known to economists like me nationwide, but I have the extraordinary privilege of knowing them well. Dr. Angus was my thesis advisor at MIT. And what he taught me is that you need a little bit more than Economics 101 to understand the consequences of a policy like this for the people that we serve. You see, Bio 101 isn't enough to make a doctor, and you can't build a bridge with Physics 101 alone. So too with economics. There is friction and inertia and leverage in the tug of war between business owners and workers and the customers they serve. And that sometimes, in the face of a non-competitive market, there is scope for government to intervene and level the playing field and generate gains for the greater good of all. Now, Mr. Speaker, long before I was a professor of economics, I was just another preacher's kid, like Delegate Graves, and a lot of other people in this world, and that's where I studied the book of Matthew and how we serve the least of these, the people who need us most. And now that I'm both a preacher's kid and a professor of economics, I understand even better that that simple belief that raising the minimum wage hurts workers is an article of faith, not an economic fact. And while we here in this body abide by the statute on that wall that says that we can all worship however we want, I would simply ask that we each do it in our own names, for our own profession. As for me and my house, we've already shown where we stand by the highest honor we have.
I am familiar with the study that the delegate references, and while it was certainly an interesting study, I'm not sure I would elevate it to the level of holy canon. Nor would I say that a particular study which took a look at a fairly narrow concept between New Jersey and Pennsylvania automatically erases 79% of the studies that we have over the last 30 years showing a significant impact to unemployment or employment in general when we raise the minimum wage. So again, the argument that's being used or suggesting that this is an article of faith, well, if it's an article of faith to say that 79% of studies over the last 30 years demonstrate this economic reality, but it's not an article of faith to completely change the way that we think about demand curves based off of 21%, and of that 21%, only 4% that actually showed any sort of statistical significance. Well, then I think we flip what we're talking about here. And again, nothing is easier than to portray this as you're the bad guy if you don't think raising the minimum wage actually helps people at the lower end of the economic ladder. That's easy. It seems so superficially plausible. But how many different experiences, real life experiences, do we have to have with this? I mean, do we honestly believe that we can just simply defy logic because we care enough? No, if you care, Mr. Speaker, you take a look at the economic realities of what's going to happen, and you modify your policy in order to give people the best chance within reality. You don't attempt to change it through a code section.